Sleeper must awake.
Magic? Should we use K at the end of that word? Like to talk about the millennia old practices that people do to interact with the disincarnate entities and the energetic manifestations. Should we use a K? You know what? I'm rebelling against the K. I'm not going to use it because it feels like these practices bring more truth to our understanding of reality than parlor tricks and like Houdini type magic. So yeah, I'd argue that magic, the real magic, shouldn't have to justify itself with an additional letter. We're going to talk about magic today with our guest, Douglas Batchelor. But just before we start with that, I just want to put in a quick word. And I know it's a bit premature. I know I kind of feel bad actually talking about that, but I want to just put in a quick word for my Patreon that I created, the Patreon page. I'm building it. I've added. I'm starting to figure out what I want to do on that. I realize that today's episode is the fifth one. Other than that, like I've written a book, and I work on other stuff too, like all related to spirituality and mysticism in many ways. Um, so there's a lot to support in my work, and I really need it right now. Even though I've just started the podcast. So I understand if there's not much on there yet to motivate you to support the podcast or my work. Um, but I kind of really need it right now. So that's all I'm gonna say. No, I'm gonna say that yeah, I'm working on figuring out always more stuff to put in the Patreon. And recently I've started recording videos on Sundays, just quick recaps of the last week and the just some words about the week, the coming week. And it's basically me having my tea, my Sunday afternoon tea with my patrons who are basically non-existent right now. Why am I doing this? All right, so that was weird. I don't know if I'm gonna leave that in. Okay, onward to the show. So Hopscotch Chronicles episode 5 today. We receive to the show. Can we say that we have on the show today the great, the luminous Douglas Batchelor from the What Magic Is This podcast. And yeah, we're going to talk about magic. We're not really going to talk about the technical stuff. We're going to talk about the how magic affects our own reality, and what does it have to do with will and free will. And so we're gonna go deep, as it seems is kind of what this show is about. So yeah, some comments about the episode. I mean, Douglas is just a super nice guy. It's really, really friendly. I got along with him very well. I hope it's reciprocal. In fact, I kind of forgot that I was doing an interview. So I forgot that I wanted to experiment with the tradition with a traditional first question. So I didn't ask him, and I even forgot to the also traditional, maybe even more traditional for podcasts, um, the question, where can people learn about your work, at the end of the show. uh, I don't usually ask that question to my friends when I finish talking with them. So yeah, he was just a really friendly guy. And also, while re-listening to the show, I just got that Douglas's birthday is probably this week, because I think we recorded last week, and he said my birthday is next week. So happy birthday, Douglas. Anyways, go check him out. Listen to this really cool interview, really cool discussion. Yeah, maybe just a little bio that I wrote for him. Here we go. So, mostly known for being the creator of the host of the What Magic Is This podcast, Douglas Batchelor has been practicing magic for the last 20 years. Although his personal practices are centered in, quote, goetic, necromantic nigromancy, with flourishes of Greco-Egyptian shenanigans. His passion and enthusiasm for all things magical are perfectly illustrated by the wide array of topics and guests appearing on his show. And yeah, I will add that Doug is just an all around cool human being, super generous. And to top it all off, a mystic. The kind of people I really like. So, yeah, that's it. Onward with the interview. Douglas Batchelor, it is you.
It's me.
Thank you so much for accepting this invitation. I have to let people know that I probably wouldn't be here. Well, on Earth, I would be on Earth,
Okay.
Earth still,
Good.
but doing podcast if it wasn't for you. So it all started because you suggested the idea to me. Like, I wanted ways to promote my own work. And you said, well, that's usually a good idea to do a bunch of episodes, and but as I've told you before, and I've told the listeners of this podcast, the 3 or 4 of them, I think I'm gonna really enjoy this, and I'm especially happy to have you on today because it's it's a new thing for me, and it's very makes me a bit more secure, talking to someone who's been doing that for so many years. So thank you for being here. Hello, Douglas. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm good, man. It's been a hell of a time. I was a little ill last week, so last week was a bit of a write-off, but I'm good this week, and just a ton of work to do. But I always have time to talk to listeners and to people that want me to be on their show. It's that's when I get to have my fun. Like I like recording my shows, but when I'm on other people's shows, it's always a great time.
Yeah, I guess it's a different vibe. You don't have well, I know, talking from my very long experience in podcast, it's not as stressful being invited as
No.
So, but I'm okay.
I literally used to like do notes. Because when I first started, the first person that had me on their show was Eric Arneson from the Arnemancy podcast. He's doing another podcast called Whiz Biz now. But man, my first times being on other people's shows, I used to like do notes for nothing. And then I would talk to them and none of the things that I wrote for my notes would be like on there. So it's just like, I was just like, oh, I'm doing this wrong. I should just like go on and just be myself. Cause yeah. So talking to other people is like, this is nice. This is nice when I get to just be myself, relax, and as opposed to like have 40 pages of notes before doing an episode and all these questions. So it's I enjoy podcasting on both ends of the camera, the microphone, both sides of the microphone. I don't know. I'm trying to go with the metaphor here, and it's failing. But no, it's great to be here and talking with you, Dominic.
All right.
Fellow Canadian.
Yes, absolutely.
That's
We're
right.
on almost both
yes.
opposites, but still.
Yeah.
I don't have my flag today. It's down, but
flags. What are they? Right?
Yeah, whatever flags. Like what's interesting aside from the fact that I'm interviewing the guy who suggested the idea of me doing podcast. The other interesting thing is recently I was let's say in meditation. I'll call it that. And had this I would say voice coming in saying that happens once in a while, and saying step into your magical self. So for me, having you on today is doubly interesting, and just to tell you where I come from. So when I ask the questions, a bit about who's asking them. For many years, I've been interested in magic. Mainly at first through podcast, so including your show and Gordon the White, who hosts Rune Soup. So and I've really tried, like getting into practice, but with me, like I always get one step deeper in the philosophical aspect of what I'm doing. And I discovered that by going through your the content on your Patreon. I discovered that it feels like you're asking those same questions yourself. Like it, because it seems to me that some people practice either magic or manifestation work or something like that, and it just seems so easy for them to focus on one thing that they want, But for me, I don't want to make it too long, but for me, like I always get to the step further, like, are you sure this is what you want, And this has stopped me from doing anything magical in any way, So I'm super interested in magic and I really want to do some,
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm so happy to talk to you today, because I want you to tell me the secrets of manifestation.
The secrets of magic. So let's hang on the P word then for a little bit. So I think for a lot of people, when they initially start getting interested in magic and the occult, they combine the two, and the two have similarities. The occult and magic share a lot of similarities. But I think for the most part, for most people, when they come to magic and the occult, they have this idea, and this is an oversimplification, and a lot of times when people in retrospect will say, well, that just isn't true because my understandings have changed since then. But most people, when they get into magic, they just think that magic and the occult is spicy philosophy. They just think it's like the philosophy that you weren't taught, and that's it. Don't worry, your metaphysics can still remain the same. You can still be an ardent materialist and just believe that matter is everything and this kind of things. But the occult and magic is just merely The occult is just this set of philosophy that is different, that hasn't been taught in schools, and magic is merely just errant psychology. But the world is still the same as it is in the way that it appears to you now. And so when people start out in magic, because my show is mainly for people that are interested and curious about magic, I try to tell them, leave philosophy behind to start out. It's fine. Philosophy is fine. But I also say, like, to start out, philosophy is not where you want to head to. Where I tell people to head is this idea of epistemology. How do we arrive at our beliefs? Where do we get our philosophies from? Those things don't come out of a vacuum. Certain societal and cultural conditions create how we understand the world. And so at the very beginning, of course, philosophy is, we're all people that are drawn to magic and the occult, yourself, myself, we're seekers, right? And the first place that we're going to go are these like different ideas of philosophy, these philosophical ideas. But as far as doing practical magic, actually just doing things to try and, I tell people as a magician, when they ask me, what does a magician do? I just say, I do weird shit and hoping that weird shit happens. If you want to do practical magic, I say for the beginning, leave the idea of philosophy behind, because you're just going to get tripped up on it for the most part. You can come back and philosophize about as much of it as you want to. But at the beginning, try to look at where you are situated now and how you got to those ideas in the first place. And that is epistemology. So that is a more functional way of looking at magic, is not the whole philosophy of how magic is and has been through the last 600 years, but how over the last 3,000 years did we arrive at that set of philosophies in which things like magic in a Western context arose. So yeah, I say begin with philosophy, interesting, cool. Put it on the back burner for a little bit. Look at epistemology. And then maybe once you get a little bit further on, we'll talk about something like eschatology and the end of the world and death and stuff like that. But to begin with, epistemology is a far more interesting thing to sit with. As far as practical magic, you can, and here's the thing, because a lot of people throw this word around, armchair magician. I fucking, can I swear? I just did.
Go ahead.
There's this idea of armchair magicians. They get poo-pooed, and they have been poo-pooed for quite some time within magic circles, of like people that just like the occult and magic. They buy the books, but they don't do any of the practices, and therefore they're less interesting and less cool. Nah. I just say, like, you're an occult philosopher. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with sitting with these really fascinating and cool ideas without ever wanting to do them practically at all. There is nothing wrong with that. But as I've said at least 7 times over the last 7 minutes, to begin with, if you want to do practical magic, those are the people that I'm talking to mostly through my podcast for the most part. If you want to do practical magic, philosophy, put it on the back burner for a little bit. Come back and revisit it. Look at how you got to where you got to now, as to how we understand the world and how materialism became the dominant thought form. Because through 99% of this experiment that we call humanity, we had something called animism, which was the way that we saw the world for the most part. We saw a world emboldened with living things. Everything was alive. And yet this 1/10 of our experience, 1/10 of 1% of this experience that we've had on this planet has been materialism. And that's the right one. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, somehow, well, personally, I can say that it doesn't make sense in the way that I experience the world. Just this materialism. It's not that there's something more. It's that the materialism is more metaphysical than we think. It's the way that I would put it, I think. But that said, I have to say that to like, for me, I did have to struggle with the because now, like this phrase that I heard, step into your magical self, feels right now, because I had to struggle with this idea of will, and where does will come from. And it's precisely what you're saying, like, uh, you have to kind of tear apart your beliefs about the world. Specifically, I would say, um, understand how even beliefs form within oneself. Like how just witness them take form within our psyches and within our egos. So personally, I had to go towards that, to to kind of feel ready, maybe a bit more now, to do some magical workings, because I wanted to make sure that I was uh, acting upon a kind of a moral ground that I felt good and okay with.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I told you before we started recording, and I don't know if you knew that already, but I wrote a book. It's basically on self knowledge, and there is a chapter on magic. But the chapter is mostly questioning, why would you do magic?
Hmm.
Leaving the the reader with, truly struggling with that question. Because there's
Right.
no, I mean, if you don't, what's the difference in between, I don't know, like just enacting uh e- e- egotistical capitalist ideas in the material world through money, or through metaphysical means. Like, if you don't know where you start from, like, to me it was problematic. But I feel in the last year or so, I found this moral grounding. So I'm like, okay, now, and this is something that comes out of your work, I believe, and the vibe that you give through your Patreon and your podcast is, it seems fun. Like, this idea of fun, it just seems cool.
Yeah.
Like, just a cool way, deeper way, mysterious way to engage with the world, and the world you live in. So maybe that's why we should do magic. But
Yeah.
just to wrap it up with because I was going to a question. As I said, I'm sorry if I ramble.
No,
um,
that's what podcasts are for, dude. This is like if
I
that
know,
if
but I mean,
there's
you're
no point
here.
of
Like,
oh,
I want to
no,
make it
man.
about you.
I like listening to a good rant as much as the next person. It's great.
Well, okay, because where I was going with that, and I think you kind of addressed that. No, maybe not. I don't know. Yeah, I guess so. Uh, as I said, the I think I said it. The book that I wrote is mainly on self knowledge. So
Yeah.
that's my starting point every time.
Right.
So I'd like to have your impression of how directly magic can be a way of knowing oneself. And I mean directly, not just because anything, like, can be used to know oneself,
Yeah.
but specifically magic.
So I've got opinions on this. Then they're somewhat controversial, and people who are more versed in what we like to call like contemporary, what passes itself off as contemporary occult ideas, um, think that this idea is complete bullshit. But I in my life I've seen it to be true. Um, for a lot of people when they first come into looking at magic and the occult, they don't know the difference between the two of them. They think that they're the same thing for the most part, but they share attributes. So sorry if I'm repeating myself, but they think that the point of magic, a lot of times people will think that the point of magic is to get to know yourself better, to get to get to that point of self actualization and knowledge, and or to meet this spirit called the holy guardian angel that will show you everything. It'll be like this guide for you, for everything. And it was really big in Thelema, which is this magical belief system and philosophy developed by Aleister Crowley, who's kind of like the big occult figure over the last 150 years. I think for myself, again, the people that I'm talking to are mainly beginners. I say, just do the magic, and just and tinker around, because you will eventually learn more about yourself that way than if you have that as the sole ambition of what you were doing. I think that most of my growth, as far as magically, came out of experimentation with certain kinds of magic, and experimentation with like things that seemed kind of like scary, like things like evoking what would be called by anybody else demons, right? Like, what do demons have to show me about self-actualization? Well, to begin with, nothing. But through going through that process, and it is a whole process. It's not just like a phone book where I like, oh, here we go, dialing this up. It's a whole process that you have to get through. And there was mistakes, and there was things that were weird, and there was things that were funny and scary. And so I think that showed me more about myself than having that sole ambition of trying to do a magical operation to get to know myself a little bit more. And so for people starting out, I think that there's this urge to want to get to know you, because a lot of people come to magic because they feel out of place within this world, right? We feel that the systems that we have surrounded ourselves at best are hypocritical and crumbling. And so we look to errant forms of understanding and being and sitting with the world. And a lot of people discover magic in the occult. And so, but they take with them this old idea of almost like a supermarket for spirit, for thought and imagination ecosystems, with this idea that magic solely exists to show you more about yourself. And so do spells that show you more about yourself. And so I get away from that. I say I've learned way more about myself by just doing strange things. and eventually that kind of gets you to where you need to be. Now that is very different. That is very personalized. But I also been surrounded. I've been doing magic for 20 years. I've been around people who have tried with doing the self-actualization and the conversation with the holy guardian angel, and some of them do eventually get there, and they say they do. But most people, I think, when they have that as the sole ambition, it's just magic kind of dwindles away, and then they just go back to being who they were before, and it's just yay, materialism, and magic has always been bullshit. So I think that by setting the goal for magic within your life to really just be about enchanting your life, and that fun thing that people come to my show for, that's really where it is, right? So I guess in short, in sum, it's always about the journey. It's always about the journey. It's never about the destination. And you'll learn way more about yourself just actually doing things than you do at actually arriving at something that you want to have. Now, that's not to say don't have self-actualization or learning more about yourself as in a goal or an ambition. Certainly do. Try to not be a nihilist. Try not to be an asshole. Be kind, be good. But just do fun. Just do shit to hopefully have weird shit happen. And you will learn so much about yourself.
Well, I'm already learning a lot, because I had this idea that people came to magic to either to, like just to do things, to like manifest things that they want, and basically get the girl or the boy or the
magic, has
the person.
Always been about getting paid and getting laid. Like, seriously, and that's not a low ambition stuff. Magic has always been, from the very beginning, divination, trying to learn, see the future, make money, and have sex. That doesn't change. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're honest with yourself. As long as you're honest with yourself, right?
I was just not, I guess, familiar with the idea of people coming to magic to meet the, I don't know how you called it, the holy guardian angel
Holy
or something
guardian
like that.
angel. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So
Yeah.
there you go.
It's big.
And
That's a
also,
lot of. If you go into new age bookstores, and most of the time you'll just find stuff about runes and stones and stuff like that. No shade, but any of the books that are there in like your local new age store that are about magic, usually there's going to be a K within magic,
yeah,
MAGICK, and usually it will be some form of 19th century lodge magic that has as its sole ambition for you to have knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, which is this figure that's going to come and show you everything. And I'm not trying to cast dispersions for people that do have this as their sole ambition for doing magic,
yeah.
but that's a very specific aspect of a very specific kind of magic that I think a lot
Okay.
of people confuse for being magic proper. It's not. It's just a
Hmm.
part of magic.
Well, it's interesting. It reminds me of something Krishnamurti said, which was something like the ego cannot know itself, like the machine cannot know itself. So in some ways, I mean, maybe doing magic to with this idea of knowing your higher self or something like that is right from the start, it's not going to work in a way, but again, not disparaging, because we all have to take the necessary steps for our own evolution. And to me, like, being the self-knowledge guy, I was
Mhm.
making scare quotes, by the way, for people who just
Nice,
listen
nice.
on audio. It feels more productive, if I can use that word, uh, to have this approach of magic, I guess, that's a bit more intuitive. Like, yes, learn from others, read the books that are appealing to you, but like, yeah, have fun doing that, and learn through. The best way to get to know our higher self, I think, is to mess around with this idea of intuition. So I don't know, like,
100%.
it's just something I discovered of you, and of your practice, or at least of what you're suggesting, mostly through your Patreon, by the way. And I highly suggest people
Come join my Patreon. It's $7 a
subscribe,
month.
and because, yeah, there's a lot of really cool
$10
stuff.
Canadian, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, behind the curtain,
That's
there's a
right.
lot of really cool stuff going
There
on.
is a lot of stuff there. There is a lot of stuff there. Yeah,
So go ahead.
I just think that our lives have been rendered so boring by school and like our parents. And that's
Yeah.
not the reason I do magic. I've been doing practical magic for, I say, about 20 years, but I I've always been a magician, and truly leaning into and enchanting your life. There's something very special about that. It's really quite a beautiful thing. So that's my
Yeah.
pitch for people. It's like, just life's so boring already, and that doesn't mean that I don't think that what I'm doing is actually real. I do think I'm not just like cosplaying being Harry Potter. I truly believe magic is real. I've truly seen it work in my life.
Hmm.
And that's just basically my show, and what I do is just basically being like, here's how I've done certain things. Take it for what it's worth. If you just find this interesting, you don't think it's real, that's still cool. Like, and so I'm not offering to change people's lives. I'm just showing you how magic has changed mine. That's literally it. And
Hmm.
have fun along the way, right? I cut you off, Dominic. I'm sorry. I do that quite often.
No. It's quite okay. And actually, you kind of I wasn't going there, but I had this question for the beginning of the interview, and I thought, oh, maybe it's too boring. I don't know, but maybe that's. I was wondering, like, for people who don't know you,
Mhm.
what it's a basic and maybe a bit stupid
I love the
question, but
basic questions.
all
By
right,
all
all right.
means, fire away.
So, Douglas, what
Yes.
kind of magician are you? You're not a chaos magician, ceremonial. I've heard you use the term practical
Yeah.
magic. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, how would you describe yourself as a wizard?
So what I say to people, and the answer to this is always what, is I call myself I dabble in goetic, necromantic, nigromancy with flourishes of Greco-Egyptian shenanigans. And so each part of that we have to break down. So goetic is just goes is this there's a lot of speculation and there's a lot of academic trying to find a real way of talking about it, but goetic comes from the word goes, which is this idea of speaking to underworld and chthonic and forces of death that existed in archaic Greece. They were looked down upon by the hoi polloi of Greek society, particularly in Athens. They were kind of the way that I'm just going to say more materialist people look down on those people that do huge tent services where they talk to dead relatives of the people inside. That kind of spite existed in archaic Greek for this group of people that may or may not have existed, called the Goas. So goetic just basically means that I tend to involve my magic around spirits of underworld and the dead, and necromantic. My magic mainly, for the most part, as I deal and interact with spirits of mostly dead human beings, people who have existed before us, whether that be through things like divination or in assistance on any kind of a magical operation that I'm doing. Nigromancy is this idea of adjuring and compelling spirits. Most of the time they're infernal spirits, so that would be spirits like things like demons and whatnot, usually through a kind of magic called Solomonic magic, which is what everybody who has seen movies about magicians doing, where there's a circle on the floor, they are holding a book, they're reading from this book, and then things appear to them. The room is really smoky, it looks kind of sinister and evil and stuff like that, and kind of like spooky. That's what nigromancy is. And the Greco-Egyptian flourishes is that I'm hugely influenced by the period of magic from about 300 BC to 300 AD that existed in and around Egypt. And when Egypt was Hellenized by Alexander the Great, there was this really strange things that happened with the religions and the beliefs in that time that concocted and is present through this group of documents that we have. And they're not written by one source. They're written by many, many sources, but they were compiled into this document called the Greek Magical Papyri. And it's basically just like spells and rituals that are real, that were used by most likely somebody, a large portion, most likely written by somebody who was a priest in Egypt for 6 months of the year. And then the other 6 months of the year, he would be like a door-to-door magician. He would go around and do magic for you, be they trying to keep away evil forces, trying to help you send dreams to other people. Anyways, these were compiled into one book and called the Greek Magical Papyri in translation. Really crazy stuff, but really, really interesting. It's that Indiana Jones angle, like, whoa, this is actually real. And these scrolls really do exist. So that also, a great deal of my magic comes from just being able to look at these historic magical documents. So when I say I am a goetic, necromantic nigromancer who dabbles in flourishes of Greco-Egyptian shenanigans, people just go, huh? And then I say I'm a chaos magician, just because it makes things easier. People actually know what a chaos magician is, because I take where I get my spells and rituals from many different places. I mean, that thing that I said earlier, that's kind of like my baseline for the most part, but I'll take spells and rituals from anywhere. But and so when I say I'm a chaos magician, people just are like, "Oh yeah, cool. I know what that is." So because that other thing that I just mentioned is really, unless you know what I'm, and I say that to be kind of like an asshole, truly. Like I'm going to say, like, it sounds preposterous, and it is, and I sound preposterous saying it, but it's specific, but also very pompous and therefore funny, and I'm amused by it. But for anybody else asking, I'm a chaos magician. I try things until they work, and if they work, I keep doing them. When they stop working, I stop doing them, and I just keep trying shit.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Amazing.
That's my magic. That's for the most part.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I didn't know. Like, I was afraid to ask the question, thinking, like, is there, like, are you? Is he gonna think, like, oh, that question again? But I
Oh,
mean, like, yeah, I didn't know. Like, apparently, you've thought about that a lot,
they
or
have. They have.
either.
Well, like
Okay.
people would ask me on podcasts and elsewhere, like what actually do you do? Because my podcast, for the most part, except for the very beginning, for the most part, my podcast isn't really about me that much. The Patreon stuff is a lot about me, but my regular normal podcast, I don't. It's about the topics that I'm talking about. So I used to get questions all the time from people on other podcasts and just through direct messages or emails, like, what do you actually do, Douglas? And so that's what I say,
Mhm.
like goetic, necromantic, nigromancy with some Greco-Egyptian stuff.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
I
it's
think I'm pretty
basically
cool.
the.
I think I'm interesting because you know what, like I became the magician that I've always wanted to be, right? Like I took
Yeah.
the elements that are always been most fascinating to myself, and so that's
Hmm.
the magic I surround myself in, and that's my baseline and foundation for how I approach magic, and it has been for the last decade. Truly is kind of when that has been solidified. The first 10 years of my magical journey were a little bit wishy-washy with like mostly kind of like 80s chaos magic, but a lot, and then like a lot of ceremonial lodge-based magic and
Hmm.
Thelema. And then I eventually just shifted to doing the stuff that really interested me. And I said like the magical scrolls, that speaks to me. That Indiana Jones is probably my biggest magical influence. Like that, like that, and I say that not as like trying to be like a hipster, but I loved Indiana Jones. I loved that they were talking about very real things, but also very unreal things, and that
Hmm.
magic has been a part of humanity for a long period of time, and we have documents and artifacts that prove this. And so that's
Hmm.
why not use that stuff that we know people were using, and look at it and bring that into our lives in some way. I think it's fascinating.
Totally. And also like, uh, even, well, other or even more than a magician or a wizard, I feel like to me, you fall in the category, which is kind of a non-category, but anyways, of a mystic, basically, a
Sure.
seeker, as you said. And to
Yeah.
me, like, this is the crux of the thing. Like, and I wonder, like, how am I gonna get the over time, like, am I gonna get the same questions that you get? Because, like, what do you do exactly? Because I plan to, like, uh speak with, well, so far, like, you're the third interview. The first one was with Miguel Connor of Aeon by Radio, who's a Gnostic. The second one was with Ian Duncan, who's a Taoist priest. And here we are today. So, like, what, but the common thing between the you three guys is the seeking quality.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's easy for me to speak. And by the way, like, for sure, I'm not gonna get through all those questions I have right now, for sure, because it's too cool, and I don't want to make this 3 hours long. So, all right.
No, but I
Um,
think that there is something deeply within us. I truly think, and I don't think it's something that is just I think that the interest in this kind of thing is getting quite large because, again, all of these structures that, and Miguel talks about this quite a bit, the things that we surround ourselves with are crumbling and they're not doing very well. And the we're realizing that the epistemology and how we got here is a little bit long in tooth. And so I think that now, yeah, most people have more questions these days. And they're seeking it, trying to arrive at the answers via different means, because they see that the toolkit that was handed to us from birth, the culture that we surround ourselves with, is not doing very well at trying to show us truly who we are as individuals. So when you say like the answers, if you're going to arrive at the same questions that I do, I'm going to tell you right now, you're not. You're not, Dominic. Like, nobody is. And that's the cool thing about magic. And again, that's what I promulgate, is that everybody's journey is going to be vastly different and very, very cool. And there's going to be moments where you're going to want to share this with other people. And it's going to fall on deaf ears, because it's so individualized and so personalized. What you do with that information and how you come back and present it to the world is a special thing. But the answers themselves aren't the important aspect, and they are very individualized. So, yeah, the born seekers, the people that are out here trying to look for things. I've always just said, like, the point of seeking is not getting the answers; it's to just keep seeking. That truly is. It's like, just keep trying to find things that are interesting and truly move you. And never be content once you think you've gotten to the end of something or you've understood it completely. Just move the compass a little bit and seek elsewhere. That's all. That's not all who wander are lost, blah, 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 that kind of thing. Like, truly, these aphorisms and these expressions exist for a reason. And as cliche as there are, we truly find a wisdom in just the trite nature of them. And yeah, it's true. Just, I don't think the second that I say that I found all the answers and I know who I am as a human being, log off and stop listening to my podcast. I'll just tell everybody now, if I start saying like, I know how to tell you how to do everything so you can be like me, stop listening to my show. Doug has lost it. He's gone insane, because that's never been the point. Ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's kind of the crux of for me of self-knowledge, and it's kind of the untold punch of the book that I wrote, is that, by looking to find yourself and who you are, like the more you peel away the the less that's left, so yeah, if same for me, by the way, like for maybe a bit more people will listen to this, but if I ever start saying I've found myself, I know who I am, tune out. Yeah.
Good.
But I do feel like I've and this is what gets me interested in magic again, because in the last few years, I do feel that I've connected with a flow within life, within space-time, that it's just basically a flow of nature, and it feels strange because it's kind of conflicting with the idea of free will a little, so it's like, so I don't know who I am, but I know I know this, but I know this feeling of being, in the flow of energy, that the same flow that gets these plants to grow,
Right.
So, but you don't know what that is. You never know. You just follow it, basically. You know? So
why does everything need a definition? Nah, just like, and here's the thing: it feels good if you're feeling like there's things working for you. just keep going with it, truly. And
Exactly.
the less labels you try to put on things, the better. Like it
For sure.
is a special thing. And I know the feeling that you're talking about. Everybody's experiences such things differently. But yeah, there's just what sometimes you can't get to this state. And for myself, I go through periods of time where this happens, and then it's like a car crash afterwards, because or jarring when you don't feel like that. But yeah, it's just, when there's an ease to life and an ease to understanding, that's always a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Oh, I just want to make clear though that I'm not in that blissful state 24/7. By the way, just
Oh
like
gosh,
it's
no!
like
Can you imagine how exhausting that
no,
would
no,
be?
no, no, no. It's yeah, or boring actually. You know,
Right?
like it's what's fun about this whole life thing. You know, it's like as I say sometimes, it's like a video game. Like if it's just someone walking around, you know, like it would be so boring. You need the boss, you need the challenge, you need, you know.
Yeah.
So that's all the game. It's all the big game. But it takes me to another question, because we kind of went there. I love your concerning will, the place of will within magic. You know, especially, and I'm gonna throw this in there because you've already mentioned interactions with entities, basically, you know, discarnate entities. So this idea of free will, I've heard you. I don't know if it was your analogy or Eric Wargo's, but this idea of no, I think it was yours. The idea of sharpening the edge, you know, like so that basically, and the analogy that I use usually concerning free will is that you're basically the idea fails because it only works on a timeline, like from past to future. But bear with me. Basically, we're in that little boat that's on a river, and there's a current, and you can't do anything about that current. It's going there. So to me, free will is just steering your little egoic vehicle on that little river. And yeah, for sure you're gonna have I think you're gonna have choices to make once in a while, like bifurcations and stuff like that. But mostly it's just not crashing on the anyway. So I kind of digress, but so yeah, like this idea of the will within magic, especially when it's kind of I'm gonna pronounce that badly, collaborative. Collaborative, yeah, because you're interacting with entities, and I'd like to get back to this notion of entities further down the river. But what's the place? What is the place of free will in your own practice? Is that a bad question? Like, just
no, not at all. Because it gets
it.
asked. Because people, again, when people come to magic, a lot of times the things that will pop up, that will rise up for the very beginning, will be the definition of magic is given by Aleister Crowley, which is that magic is the oh God, it's been so long since I've said it, because to me it's just such a boring quote, but it's causing change, to cause real physical change in conformity with one's will. His whole style of magic, and for people that don't know, was called thelema, which is, I believe it just translates into Greek as will. I could be wrong, but it's this idea of it, and his conception of will was very 19th century, very Nietzsche, and very, you know. And there are discussions to have for will. As far as my take on will and how it works with magic is that that's one question that I don't even think is very interesting. And I'm not saying that your question isn't interesting. It's just that I I waffle back and forth as to whether or not there actually is free will, as an actual conception of free will is. Like, am I one who is constantly making decisions all the time? Because a lot of things like magic and astrology, some astrology doesn't have place for things like will, or sometimes it does. Some magic
Yep.
does have place for will, sometimes it doesn't. So I always waffle back and forth because there's things that are indicators to me that are just like, oh man, are we really just automata going through this weird cycle until we rebirth again? Like the time is actually not just a river, but it's like a corkscrew going through, and that there's these cycles that we can see when we stare at a certain part of the curve through space-time, and you can get really crazy with it. It can get really weird. And then there's part of me that's like, no, there has to be free will. My answer is that I don't really know. It's one of the least interesting aspects of magic to me, because I just kind of do things. Am I the one? I don't really think about, am I the one who, is this what I really want? Is this my true will? It seems like one of the least interesting aspects of the process of doing magic itself. But what I will say is that Eric Wargo released this book called Time Loops, in which he talks about how a lot of phenomena that we call paranormal can be explained through causation, through time, and that we really are entities of a four-dimensional space that can see parts of the future through things like dreams and things of this variety. And then, so there's part of me that's like, man, Eric Wargo's very right in this. And then there's this other aspect in another author who I've really enjoyed by the name of Gary Lockman, who wrote a book called Dreaming Ahead of Time, in which he takes his position from J.B. Priestley, who is a playwright and a very interesting author, who also talks about time, but with an added element of free will, in that there's like, I think there's like four, and he uses a river analogy as well. There's like four different aspects of us. There's one that like stands on the shore and that can like see everything that's happening.
Yeah.
There's one that's already in the boat that can do the steering, and then there's like this aspect of us that is like the river itself, as just we can't change certain aspects, and this strange interplay between all of them. But I find it really spooky that, and this is an experiment that has stood up to replication, is that when we're asked to do somebody did an experiment where we were asked to do certain tasks like push a button, and that we had all of these electrodes hooked up to us to be able to know when we were going to make this decision. And we saw that the action took place before the thought did. That's a spooky, like that's something that, why isn't everybody talking about this? That we are doing things before we actually have the thought to happen. Does that mean our instruments are fucked? Does that mean like truly, this is something to absolutely sit with. So the question of will for me, because it's so ingrained within magic via people like Aleister Crowley, whose whole magic was about will and to meet this entity that will tell you your true will. I don't know. It seems that seems so stuck in a certain period of time for me, that the question is one of the least interesting aspects of magic itself. And truly, I do think that magic is most about enchanting your life and the world around you, and trying really weird stuff. The truth is, I don't know if we have free will. I hope we do. And that's an honest statement. Part of me really hopes that in some way we're able to help navigate this weird boat that we're on. But I also wouldn't be surprised if we don't. Truly, I wouldn't be surprised if some aspect of this is already set up and we're just some kind of weird actors on a stage that something else has set for us. But this question used to be very pertinent to me, and it no longer is. It's kind of one of the least interesting aspects of doing this stuff. So I've made a very long answer out of this question, but I think for people that are interested in this kind of stuff as far as magic, read Eric Wargo's book, Time Loops. It's very fascinating, and he has some interesting perspectives there. Not all of them, which I'd agree with, particularly his aspect of jouissance and avoiding catastrophe, being able to allowing us to see these time loops when they occur. But also read Gary Lockman's, and the book wasn't written as a rebuttal to Eric Wargo. In fact, he kind of just brings up Eric Wargo over 3 pages and time loops. But how Gary Lockman sees the idea of time and will and these kind of things through the eyes of somebody like JB Priestley. Very fascinating stuff. But
Yeah.
I hope this doesn't sound pompous, Dominic, but it's just the idea of will to me is not an important one in my magic. Other people who I do admire, people like Peter Gray, who is the founder of Scarlet Imprint. He writes a lot about Thelema and Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons and Babylon and things like this. He definitely has things to say about will and a more nuanced conversation that can be had that stands outside of the 19th century conceptions of free will, which really truly shackle magic, I believe, contemporary magic to this day. That my job with my podcast is to try and grind 19th century conceptions of magic into the dirt because it's so. That's what people are being offered as this is what magic and the occult is, and my podcast exists to show you that it's not. So yeah, I think a lot of the way in which we think about magic, truly, actually, a lot of ways in which we think about the world comes from the latter half of the 19th century, and we're still crawling out of a very deep hole as far as how we view things like colonialism, spirit, what is and isn't alive, and epistemology, and all of these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
that was a long answer, my dude. I'm sorry. I'm so
that
sorry.
was a perfect answer, I think. I mean, like, because that's to me, like the notion of why the question is irrelevant in a way or not really interesting is very important. Why would we spend time thinking about that, in many ways? And, I mean, even this notion that, there's no free will. And you mentioned astrology. Well, personally, I think to just stay with this notion that free will is an illusion is completely like you're just gonna get yourself crazy, like you're not gonna it's kind of a useless idea, but it paradoxically, I think it's, for me at least, it's important to struggle with this notion, and from time to time, and just to maybe, and astrology. A few years ago, I finally got my natal chart done by a professional astrologer, and it was to use a popular phrase these days because of UFOs, an ontological shock.
Yeah.
Like, how come this person who doesn't know me knows all those, not only all those details of my past, but even things that I've discovered of myself that I would tell people around me, like friends, like, oh, I'm having a hard time with this thing because of this and that. And they're like, what? No, that makes no sense. Why are you thinking about that? And then this stranger, basically, if I tell her that, she says, well, that makes sense. That's because of this square thingy planet house thing, So it's like, what? So am I under the impression that I've chosen things of my life, like, but yeah, like, even in the process of do you know that I wrote a book? Have I mentioned that before?
Zinfandel, yeah.
But it was it was part of this writing, coming to term with this idea of free will. And maybe you're already like bursting with ideas, but I want to take it somewhere. I think we already have to start wrapping up. This sucks. I would talk to you for hours, but okay, let's just go ahead with it. So we're talking about free will and will, and like as I said, the last interview that I did was with Taoist priest, and we talked about entities and what their nature is. And like if you push the question far enough, like what is an entity? But what are you? Are you an entity or are you just an idea? So it's like, yeah, sure, we can go there, But still, if we want to pull it back just a little, I'm curious to know what your perception of said entities are, especially when we talk about will. Like, to me, okay, the way that I experience entities, or not to get into details, but my personal experience doesn't allow me yet, at least, to think of said entities as necessarily having a will or being like having a personality, like complex personality, like having changes of will. I feel them more like like a current, like a color, like a stream of a particular energy that always goes in that particular direction. As us, we're a bit more complex. We can change. So according to you and your experience, do you, those entities, the angels, the demons, the daimons, the whatever,
Right.
are they just ideas or archetypes? Or
They are also, yeah, but they can be almost anything, and that's what's wonderful about them, is that I don't have a concrete answer as to what entities are. I only know their expression through experience. So a lot of people will have definitions as to what spirits are. There's one, I think Jason Miller has got a pretty okay one. He says that spirits and entities are just they are organized collections of consciousness that we're able to kind of say, like, this is how they operate. Things like jinn or demons and things of that variety. I kind of back off of that definition because I still don't have a working definition as to what consciousness is, and it's using our consciousness as like a baseline for explaining consciousness. I think, like, what do I think is actually happening? I truly think we live in a world where it's safer for me to say life, and go with me here. It's safe for me to say that we live in a very haunted, very alive world that, for certain things, and via doing certain acts, for some reason, calls their influence. And how one contextualizes how that works in their mind is almost irrelevant to the actual way of how one interacts with them. I did an episode on Paracelsus, who was this incredibly fascinating figure, but through his work in these ideas of things, the word gnome comes from Paracelsus. Mermaids or sylphs and undines, these mythical creatures, salamanders for fire, they are spirits and entities, but part of the reason that they want to interact with us and that they are given agency is because they have a kind of a redemption. So part of me actually thinks that what is going on is that there's these weird influences that exist because of the amount of life that has existed on this planet and in this universe, that seeks to get to a different place. I'm not going to say a higher place, but a different place through the interaction of something material and concrete that they once might have been. So that's a very personal belief, and I might get into, and I don't want it to sound like there's a Christian redemptive element to it, because there was for Paracelsus, but I truly think that, like, I think, and one of the ways that I conceptualize it is that part of the reason that necromancy works for me so well is because I'm dealing with the spirits of dead people who I know were tangible. They've got gravestones, they've got bones, right? Like they're ash, but their ash still exists. It's being breathed into our lungs. at this very moment, you are surrounded by bodies. If you live in a city, you live in Montreal, you are in a crypt. Cities are giant graveyards. Your house is built on dead bodies. The reason necromancy works for me is that because I acknowledge that there is some aspect of this that wants to be part of and touch on this gift that I have been given, which is called life and human experience, that has a real tangible material element. So those entities interact with me that way. Would I say that goes the same for angels? No, I think angels are a very specific, completely different thing that's really even harder for me to put my finger on than, say, spirits of dead people. People have been asking me a lot recently, what do I think jinn are? Are jinn the same as like the spirits that exist in grimoires? And truthfully, it's one of those things where I haven't interacted very much with jinn. I'm not the best to speak on things like that. But what I have been doing a lot of experimenting with are fairies and fairy beliefs recently, particularly since I moved from the the giant graveyard that is Toronto to a place with less people. But there seems something very tangible about spirits of place here, very specific to what we will call the natural world. I don't really like using the word nature because it only exists to cultures that have separated from it, but that's where we find ourselves. But those seem to be a little bit like spirits of the dead, but they need more offerings. So I don't really know what's going on is what I'm trying to say. I think that perhaps the idea that my quote unquote will to try and do things and evolve them might be part of the lore with which they want to cooperate and interact with me to help me with certain things. But some days I think that some days I'm very cynical about it. And some days I'm like, is it just me making all of this up? Like, is it just me? And then some weird trick is happening where I'm tricking myself. But then there's other stuff that's like, oh, I've done this ritual and shit is falling over in my house. And it's just like, it's not an earthquake. Like, so the truth is, again, I'm just seeking. I'm not looking for answers. And I'm just noting what's happening when it happens. But entities themselves, again, might not be the best question as to like what they are. I've always been trying to look at the how of things. And again, just doing weird stuff to see weird stuff happen in my life has always been the most important aspect of what I do. But I will say this again, this is something, and there's this other podcast called The Emerald, which is really fantastic. It's a really good podcast, and I recommend everybody listen to it. Particularly he did an episode on animism, but it's totally true for the 300,000 years in which we were human beings on this earth. 1/10 of 1% of this existence saw the world as being alive, and yet this moment that we're living on, this 1/10 of 1% is the one that says that no, it's all about this dead matter that doesn't exist is the correct one. That to me is a fallacy. That to me doesn't seem right. I see the world as being haunted to the nth degree. And it's something that I say on my podcast very often, is that we live in a world completely trafficked in spirits and entities and influences that we do not understand. Human beings, us right now, the living, breathing, heartbeat-ridden things that are man, we are the ghosts. We're the temporary aspect of this planet. Because we only last so long. We truly are the ghosts here. The other spirits, whether you call them archetypes or just the ones who have been here, the old ones, I don't know, whatever concept you want to sit with, but you don't need an answer as to what entities are to see how they can operate in your life. And it's one of those things, Dominic, as well. If you never get to the place in where you think you can like give an actual true agency, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it, because just for myself, I found that my magic was more efficacious when I said it wasn't just psychology. It was actually that there are things out there that have an agency outside of what I call my will. And then my magic started becoming very real and very alive to me very quickly. And so I was like, okay, so I'm actually think that I need to spend time here, utilizing this. So, well, another long-winded answer to your question, but there is, I think, a ontological reality to spirits. What they could be, I do not know. All I can say is how I choose to interact with them and how they
Yeah.
choose to show themselves in my life is very, very real.
I guess my question was like very lighthearted and just curious, because my like I always, like I said, like I always push things too far. Like, are they just an idea, or are they just the expression of one energy, one current? Well, are you just an idea? Like I always get, and oh, we're all one. Yeah, well, we're all one, and we're one with everything, and we're like, yeah, I'm one with the mic and the bass, and I'm one with you, but I'm also one with the jinn and the daimons, and it's all part of the same universe. And it's just, we're so used to seeing it in a material way that we usually, I think, when people think of this notion of we're all one, or it's just one thing, in the psyche, like we've been so conditioned to think in materialist terms, that we think of the atoms, and oh, I'm breathing the same molecules as Ugok, the caveman,
Right.
like, but but that's a very time limited way of seeing things,
Right.
and
Right.
so
Right.
anyway, no, I love you. I love your long answers, man, and
Okay. Good.
like, and yeah, for sure, like, I don't know, like, I'm just starting this. I thought 1 hour episodes, maybe it's okay, but it already, like, for all, like, my 3 interviews, like, I'm like, oh, maybe we should do it part 2, because like there's so much interesting things that I wanted to go through. And anyways, hey, listen, I'd like to finish on a lighter note, or
Sure.
just a, well, I mean, it's a lighter note for me, maybe it's not for you. So I mean, I just have this question. So I'm gonna define very as good as I can. I'm gonna defy scrying to people.
Okay. Sure.
So I'm not what goes on, but like, just, so scrying basically is the practice of staring into, or I mean, at least generally, I guess, and you'll correct me afterwards, staring into a reflective surface, usually in the dark, usually obsidian, which is I don't think it's a stone, right? It's a
It is a stone. Yeah. It's an igneous.
isn't it a volcanic
igneous
glass? I thought it was volcanic glass.
Yeah. Yeah. It's volcanic glass.
Anyways, it's a black stone, so you can use that, or a black mirror, and then to stare in this reflective object until images or entities or appear. Okay, so far so good.
So far, so good. Yep.
All right. So the question, Douglas, if you're comfortable talking about this,
Sure.
what happened when you tried scrying using the reflective surface of your iPad?
Oh man. Yeah, it was. People like this story. So I was visiting. My mother lived.
Have you told
in,
this story before? I'm sorry, because you mentioned it on your Patreon on this thing about scrying.
I talked about it very briefly on my Greek magical papyri episode, but I've actually talked about it on some other people's podcasts. But I'd love to answer it again. So,
okay, cool.
just for people, like Charlie Brooker came up with this TV show by the name of Black Mirror. And a lot of people really like that show. He's a very astute gentleman, because he's basically saying that a lot of us are doing sorcery now by staring into the black surfaces of our phones and our iPads and our televisions and everything. They are infinite depth mirrors when not pumping images into our eyeballs. You turn them off and you will be staring into what we would call a scrying mirror. So that's for something for people to sit into, like is the show Black Mirror showing us glimpses of our future. And anyhow, I'm a fan of the first 2 seasons of the show. I haven't seen anything since then, since I think Charlie was kicked off. But I was in Mexico. My mother used to live down there. I love visiting Mexico. Mexico's a very magical place. Like there's just places that you can go and you're like, man, there's a spiritual something that exists in this place. And central Mexico to me is one of the most like, holy crap. I can taste it. Like it's palpable here. There's lots of stores that sell really crazy candles and sell apothecary supplies. And I love it. I truly do. But I worked out a series of timings for a certain ritual I was doing, and I can't go into what the actual specifics of the ritual were itself, but it required at a period of time I was to try and get an answer via scrying. This entity would have been at the time it would have been Hermanubis, which is this combination of a jackal, Anubis, ancient Egyptian god. And Hermes, Greek god that was very popular in Alexandria through that period of time that I talked about from the Greek magical papyri from earlier. Anyhow, I believe they had a temple in Alexandria. Anyways, I wanted to scry, but I didn't have any kind of like a scrying instrument. So I was just like, well, I'll just use my iPad. And I had a first generation iPad. Like first generation iPads, they couldn't do very much. They were really, really shoddy. But I was like, I'll just do what I normally do for scrying. And I'm not a great scryer. I'm just not very good at it. But I was going to give it a shot. So I did all the things. I had incense. My mom and she was out. I think she was doing something. So I was like, okay, the timing's good. I'll get everything. So I went to my room. My mother had my little room for me that I was staying in. Blacked out the curtains, did the candles, incense going. I was able to find frankincense and myrrh very easily. I was using that for scrying, and so yeah, I would use I looked into my iPad, which is a black infinite depth mirror, to try and get something happening. Nothing really happened. Normally, when people start scrying, this did happen this time though. There's like a weird, and some people can get it immediately, and some people it takes a little bit of time. And a lot of times it has to do with the lighting in the room. You'll see this like gray smoke, this really weird. And when it happens, you're like, holy crap, this is really cool. And it'll start to appear within the surface of the glass. And so that did happen. But I was in that room for like an hour and 10 minutes. And besides the gray smoke, nothing else really happened. So I just kind of like closed everything down and was like, shucks. Didn't get an audience with Hermanubis, or Hermanubis didn't want to tell me anything. What happened over, because I was down there for 3 weeks. I used to visit my mom for large periods of time because I really enjoyed where she lived in Mexico. About 2 days afterwards, some very bizarre stuff started happening. Electronics started just turning on and off. Like not just like turn on and then just stay on and then we turn it off. It would be like turn on and then it would turn off. And it would turn on and then it would turn off. The television started going on and off. It's like just very bizarre stuff. My mother's electric toothbrush. It was so bizarre. Her electric toothbrush turned on while it was on its stand, which it isn't supposed to do. It's just a lot of weird electrical things started, like things that involved technology. I use technology to scry with like the iPad, and just weird electronic stuff started happening to the point where somebody who was staying with us, just like, because it was happening so often, it was happening every 2 or 3 hours, something weird would happen and would turn on and it would turn off. The furnace would turn off for some strange reason. Anyhow, I'm making a big thing of this, but this person that was staying with us is like, what is going on in here? Is there like a poltergeist or something? And I was like, okay. So they, what happened is they went for dinner, and I kind of said I didn't feel good. I was just like, oh, my tummy must have been something I ate earlier. So they went out for dinner, and I took some Palo Santo, and I just did like a Ciprianic exorcism of the entire place. I was just like, sorry, whatever it was that decided to come through, if anything did decide to, unless I was just going crazy. But it was like, it was after scrying with the iPad and the 2 days after, that was like the most specific event of one kind of poltergeist activity occurring. And it seemed to only occur through electronic devices, of them just turning on and off the coffee machine, like a coffee grinder, like just turning on without.
That's spooky. I mean, the sound, like, whoa.
Right.
Anyways. Yeah.
That happened in the, anyways, it was just like these things weren't on timers. Like I've tried to find rational explanations for it. But anyways, I did a Ciprianic, kind of like exorcism for the entire place. Palo Santo, just everywhere. Some holy water I was able to get from a church, because when you go to Mexico, it's all Catholic churches. They have little basins of holy water. I just took some holy water into a little flask and did a whole thing to my mom's place, and nothing happened afterwards. But yeah, I haven't scryed on an iPad since. I don't recommend it, just from my experience. Who knows? Your mileage might vary. But yeah, I'm just going to say, like, there is something to think with, though. This is definitely something to think of. And I don't think there's a conspiracy here, but your phone, when it is off, is a black infinite depth mirror. There is some strange stuff that's happening to us now via technology and influences. I wonder what is truly going on, and if it's just one thing or if it's a lot of stuff. But in my experience, yeah. So I didn't have an obsidian mirror. The closest thing I had was a very old, shitty first generation iPad that I only used for reading books because that's all it could do. And then I tried to use it. I set it up on like a little stand and I tried to look into it, and a little bit of smoke. But then afterwards, something was like not happy with me. And,
sounds very archonic, this idea of archons manifesting through technology and stuff. Like, I don't know.
It was just very bizarre. Greco-Egyptian magic. One of the reasons that I like Greco-Egyptian magic, just before we go here, of all of like I do Solomonic magic, which is that stuff again that I was talking about, nigromancy, demons and infernal spirits. But the most bizarre phenomena I have ever got from anything, like bizarre spooky, has always been through Greco-Egyptian magic and doing and talking through entities that are listed in that magical papyri. They're very alive. The words there are very, very, very much alive. And I've always liked ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. And I think there's a reason that to this day I find that very fascinating. It speaks very much to me, and it's where a lot of the spooky reaction comes through my interaction. And also just like, I find it very spiritually comforting. It's my jam. It's my thing that I'll just say, anybody, if you're not familiar with magic and you want to do some kind of magic, don't just go to a store and don't listen to anybody else about like what they find interesting that you should do. Go with the stuff that interests you. If you think runes are fucking cool, grab some runes. Start experimenting with runes, right? If you find the idea of will fascinating and how it pertains to magic through a 19th century concept, Thelema is pretty cool, right? If you find demons cool, grab the Ars Goetia, give it a shot. You never know, right? But don't take somebody else's word for what you should be interested in. You know what you're interested in. There's this feeling that happens with magic, but just truly, and this is maybe to get people to just listen, go to my show, go to the episodes in the menu, click on things that look interesting to you initially, and listen and go through some of the show notes. And then if it's interesting to you, there's so many great things that I have in my show notes to my show. Have a click around, have a read, pick up some books and experiment.
Yep.
That's it.
I can attest to that. I mean, for many years, like it's so funny. I never thought I'd be speaking with you one day, but I've done that for so many years. Like just going back.
It's happening right now.
Just like, just going through the list of all the shows that, and like there's a whole bunch of them like on on YouTube, like on my like saved for later. Like I have a whole
Okay.
bunch of your shows there. Some that I've listened to, and I'm like, oh, I gotta listen to it again. So yeah, just go for whatever. Like I can't speak for magic, but that's the way I would not urge, but suggest people act towards their own spirituality as a whole. Like go for the things that are appealing to you. And for me, like it's like all these ideas of it's my path is very philosophical. Yeah, I'm more in the thinking than the doing, and has been very hard for me in this. Anyways, I'll skip on that. But yeah, like I'm a really like personally, I don't know if you relate to that in some way, but I feel like because I don't know if I'm 46. I don't know if we're kind of close in.
I'm turning 40 next week.
Okay, so not that.
Yep.
Distance, so I don't know, like
I remember
for me,
the
like
80s, just like you. I remember the 80s. I'm old enough. I was 7 when the 80s ended. I remember.
But yeah, like
Tron.
just this idea of like of grunge and like punk rock, like just
I remember where I was when I saw Smells Like Teen Spirit for the first time. I remember exactly where I was. Yeah, it's
wow. Yeah, that's life-changing. I mean, like to me, like it's how I approach my own spirituality. Like I don't wait, for someone to tell you, okay, now you can do this. Now you are consecrated, just go for what feels cool.
That's right.
On wow, that was great words to finish with.
Nailed it.
Douglas, it was so cool. I'm so happy. And, like on my little list there, I had like a whole bunch of things I wanted to talk about. Imagination versus reality and synchronicities and dream times, dream space, like, so there's so much. So I hope we can do this again one day.
I'd love to. Absolutely.
That would be really cool.
Definitely.
So on that hopeful note, we're going to end this episode, and you can stay with me if you want to just say goodbye.
Absolutely.
I have a couple of questions. And yeah, that's it. I never know how to finish that. How do you finish a podcast?
I usually, what I do is like, I usually ask the guests, like, where can people find your work? And I'll say, well, Dominic,
I can't believe I forgot.
Where you can find my work is head to whatmagicisthis.com. There you'll find links to show notes and all the stuff. Don't feel bad, man. It's all good. I'm doing it now. Whatmagicisthis.com. Or if you like, come on to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/whatmagicisthis, all one word. Trust me. Go to the menu on my website, find an episode, click it. There's tons of stuff there. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter or X. I'm on Facebook. Everything's available at whatmagicisthis.com. Lots of show notes. It's great. Don't worry about it. Hopscotch Chronicles. I'll have a little page there for Hopscotch Chronicles when this episode drops too. Man,
cool.
That's normally how I end my episodes, but
I can't believe I forgot. Anyways,
it's all good.
I'm going to add to that. People, go to all those links, but also go follow Douglas on Twitter/X, because I think I gave you like the best Twitter award recently, or something like that.
You said like, I have the finest Twitter.
It's just it's fascinating. It's just fascinating stuff, and it takes you away from all this drama that's going on there. Like I'm kind of new to Twitter, and it's can be tedious, but like I'm like, oh yeah, like he's posting cool animals that you've never seen.
Yeah, that's right.
Like crazy paintings and stuff like that.
I think people, when they start social media, they think that they have to do what everybody else is doing. And my Twitter account is literally, or X, whatever it's called, is literally just me like throwing up links to shit that I think is cool or fun or interesting. Everybody goes on Twitter and wants to get into fights. I literally say it on my bio there. It's like, I'm going to save my opinions for my podcast. I just want to share weird things with you. I'm not on Twitter as much anymore. It's weird because I used to spend a lot of time on Twitter, and then I was realizing I was spending like way too much time. So I still try to pop by for like 15 minutes a day and post a couple of things, but it's not as active as it used to be. People are asking me, am I going to shift to like Blue Sky or Mastodon? And I'm just kind of like, nah, for now, cruising altitude is okay. But I'm trying to do a little bit more stuff on Instagram, but Instagram depresses me. If you, I know this might sound hyperbolic, but if you really truly want to learn how mentally ill the Western world is, spend an hour on Instagram every day. You're just like, because I'll see people there. I'm like, is this real? Like, is this, and this is not done satirically. This is somebody's actually like, this is actually a thing. Instagram is the ugly mirror held up to the Western world that just shows us how out of whack we are with each other. So anyways, this is another little rant before we leave, but yes, I'm on Twitter. My Twitter's kind of fun. I'm not spending as much time on there these days. For one, I'm very busy, but for two, it's just, I think, and I don't give a fuck that Elon Musk bought it. I truly don't. Other people will be like, Doug, you have to have an opinion. I don't. It's a fun little site, and it's sunsetting. It's dying. It's slowly dying, and I'm okay with that. So I'll enjoy it for when it is. Do I hop on something else afterwards? I don't know if I will, but thank you for saying it's a fun account, because I actually do think about what I put up on there.
Yeah, it's a great reflection of your enthusiasm, your general enthusiasm, and it's very communicative throughout your work. So people go see all that Doug does. It's amazing.
Thank you.
All right, so thanks again for being here. Thanks to people for listening to us, and we'll see you next time. So you've made it to the end of this Hopscotch Chronicles podcast episode, and I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed doing it. And I thank you so much for your attention, and I hope you're benefiting in a way or another from this conversation. So if you'd like to follow my work, whether on this podcast or my personal work, you can go to Twitter or X and follow me at Domi_Valet, DOMI_Valet. Same username for Instagram, if you prefer that platform. You can also go to the official website for the podcast, which is hopscotchchronicles.com. And if you'd like to support the podcast as well as my personal work, you can do so by subscribing to my Patreon. The address is patreon.com/Dominic Valle, DOMINIC Valle, VALLEE. There you'll find video and audio versions of the episodes without any commercials, as well as special episodes on every Sunday where I take my Sunday afternoon tea with you guys. All right, thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep reaching for the light.